Popular misconceptions about Julius Caesar. The elusive face of power. Do we really know what Caesar looked like? When we picture Julius Caesar, a vivid image comes to mind. A majestic Roman with a laurel wreath crowning his head, sharp features, a high forehead, and a characteristic receding hairline. This portrait is so deeply embedded in popular culture that we rarely question its authenticity. Yet, the reality is far more complex, and our assumptions about the famous dictator's appearance may be quite distant from the truth. Unravel the myths surrounding one of history's greatest figures. Subscribe and hit the like button to dive deeper into the secrets of ancient Rome. Sculptural depictions traditionally associated with Caesar can be divided into several types. The first is represented by the so-called Tusculan portrait, discovered in 1825 by none other than Lucien Bonaparte, Napoleon's brother. Notably, this find came at a time when interest in Caesar was particularly high, fueled by the Napoleonic cult drawing parallels between the French emperor and the Roman dictator. Today, this bust is housed in Turin's Museum of Antiquities and serves as a kind of standard for identifying other presumed images of Caesar. Busts in the same style include those in the Getty Museum in Los Angeles, the Hermitage in St. Petersburg, and the National Museum in Rome. The second common type is exemplified by the Chiaramonti bust from the Vatican museums. This sculpture shows a leaner, more ascetic face with deep wrinkles and a distinctive head tilt. Similar busts can be found in Vienna, Parma, and elsewhere. Standing apart is the so-called Green Caesar from Berlin's Antiquities collection, crafted from green slate and differing markedly from other supposed depictions of the dictator. In 2007, the collection grew with a new find, a bust raised from the bottom of the Rhone River near the French city of Arles, dated to 46 BCE, when Caesar was still alive. This sculpture sparked significant debate in the scholarly community. Some researchers hailed it as the most authentic image of the dictator, while others questioned its identification. Upon close comparison, these sculptures show only general similarities but differ significantly in details. Even within the same type, portraits can vary greatly in facial features, skull shape, and expression. This is particularly noteworthy, given that Roman portraiture was renowned for its realism and precise rendering of individual characteristics. The key problem is that not a single surviving bust bears Caesar's name. All identifications rely on comparative analysis and are often speculative. Art historians and archaeologists base attributions on stylistic features, comparisons with coin portraits, and historical descriptions, but absolute certainty remains elusive. The only indisputably authentic image of Julius Caesar, confirmed by his name, is his profile on coins minted in 44 BCE. Shortly before his death, Caesar secured the unprecedented right to place his portrait on coins during his lifetime, a privilege previously reserved for gods, heroes, or deceased ancestors. These denarii depict the profile of an older man with a receding hairline, a long neck, and a prominent Adam's apple. This image has become the foundation for identifying sculptural portraits. Written accounts of Caesar's appearance are scarce and not particularly detailed. Suetonius in his biography mentions Caesar's tall stature, fair complexion, full figure, and striking black eyes. He also notes that Caesar was sensitive about his emerging baldness, combing his hair forward and wearing the laurel wreath granted by the Senate, which served both as a symbol of power and a way to conceal his thinning hair. Thus, our perception of Caesar's appearance rests on fragile evidence, largely the result of historical reconstructions rather than direct testimony. The true likeness of the man who reshaped Roman history may forever remain an enigma. The legend of multitasking genius, truth and myth about Caesar's mental prowess. In modern culture, Julius Caesar is often portrayed as a genius of multitasking, capable of dictating multiple letters, engaging in conversation, and analyzing military maps simultaneously. This image of a superhuman with extraordinary cognitive abilities is firmly rooted in our perception of the great Roman. But how much of this reputation aligns with historical facts? Consulting ancient sources, we find the origins of this myth. Plutarch, citing Gaius, a trusted ally and biographer of Caesar, mentions that during military campaigns, the dictator could dictate 2 or more letters to his secretaries while riding horseback. Pliny the Elder, in his Natural History, goes further, praising Caesar's mental agility, claiming he could read or write while simultaneously listening and dictating up to 7 letters. Suetonius, referencing those close to Caesar, reports that he habitually read and responded to correspondence even during public events, such as circus spectacles. A critical analysis of these accounts reveals that this was likely not true multitasking in the modern sense, but rather an ability to swiftly switch between different activities. Modern cognitive psychology has demonstrated that the human brain is fundamentally incapable of performing multiple attention-demanding tasks simultaneously. Instead, it rapidly shifts focus, with unavoidable losses in efficiency. So, what lies behind Caesar's reputation as a master of multitasking? Likely an exceptional ability to concentrate, allowing him to effectively allocate attention and quickly shift between various intellectual tasks. His working memory, it seems, far surpassed average capabilities, enabling him to retain and process large volumes of information rapidly. Context is also crucial. Ancient authors, particularly those writing after Caesar's death, tended to idealize and even deify prominent figures. In Roman literary tradition, it was customary to endow great individuals with near superhuman abilities, and Caesar's mental talents may have been exaggerated to emphasize his exceptional nature. Nevertheless, even without this mythologized layer, Caesar's intellectual abilities remain impressive. He was a brilliant orator, a talented writer. His commentaries on the Gallic War are still studied as a model of clear and concise Latin style, a shrewd politician, and an outstanding military commander. These accomplishments alone testify to his extraordinary intellect, without requiring the attribution of supernatural multitasking. Interestingly, Caesar did possess a rare trait that may have contributed to this perception. He could function with minimal sleep. According to Suetonius, the dictator slept very little, and often dictated letters or read documents at night. This endurance likely created the impression that he was performing multiple tasks simultaneously. Thus, while the legend of superhuman multitasking is an exaggeration, it is rooted in Caesar's genuine cognitive efficiency, organizational skills, and relentless focus, which enabled him to achieve remarkable results across diverse domains. Games with names, Gaius vs. Caius, and other naming myths. One of the most widespread misconceptions about Julius Caesar concerns his personal name. In Russian literature and popular culture, the variant Caius Julius Caesar is frequently encountered instead of the correct Gaius Julius Caesar. This error has a long history and an intriguing linguistic explanation. The alternative form Caius has been entrenched in Russian tradition for a long time. It can be found in the works of classic authors like Turgenev, Bulgakov, and Ilf and Petrov. Abroad, the form Caius also appears not only in fiction, but even in some popular scholarly publications. To understand the origin of this misconception, we must turn to the history of the Latin alphabet. Initially in Latin, the sounds K and G were represented by the same letter, C. This was due to Latin borrowing its alphabet from the Etruscans, whose language lacked the G sound and thus required no separate letter. As Latin evolved and literacy spread, the need to differentiate these sounds arose. Around the 3rd century BCE, a modified letter G was introduced, essentially a C with a small tail added. However, in certain contexts, particularly in established abbreviations, initials on emblems, tombstones, or dedicatory inscriptions, the old form persisted. Thus, the initial C always denoted the praenomen Gaius, while CN stood for Gnaeus. This duality in writing became a source of confusion. During the Renaissance, when interest in antiquity surged, scholars working with Latin texts sometimes misinterpreted this feature of Roman epigraphy, assuming that C and G represented different names. Thus, the variant Caius emerged, which later transformed into Kai in Russian translations. It's important to note that the name Gaius was one of the most common personal names in ancient Rome. It was part of a limited set of praenomina used by Roman citizens. Besides Gaius Julius Caesar, This name was borne by many prominent Romans, including Emperor Caligula, Gaius Julius Caesar Germanicus, the philosopher and politician Gaius Gracchus, and others. The Roman naming system, with its tripartite structure, praenomen, personal name, nomen, clan name, and cognomen, family branch or nickname, often confuses modern readers. In Caesar's case, his full name, Gaius Julius Caesar, indicates Gaius, personal name, Julius, belonging to the Julii clan, and Caesar, a branch of that clan. Interestingly, the term Caesar, originally a family nickname, later became a title for Roman Vaesu. Emperors, and eventually transformed into Kaiser and Tsar in various European languages. Another common misconception is the notion that Julius Caesar is a first name and surname in the modern sense. In the Roman system, Julius was the nomen, indicating affiliation with the Julii, one of Rome's oldest patrician clans, which traced its origins to Aeneas and the goddess Venus. Caesar was the cognomen, possibly meaning hairy, from Caesares, or referring to a birth via cesarean section, from cedere, to cut. Thus, the correct personal name of the dictator is Gaius, not Caius. This confusion, seemingly a minor detail, is a striking example of how historical information can be distorted through centuries and across different linguistic traditions. The final scene, where Caesar's murder really happened. The image of Julius Caesar, pierced by the daggers of conspirators during a Senate meeting, is one of the most recognizable scenes in ancient history. This dramatic moment is immortalized in countless paintings, sculptures, theatrical productions, and films. However, the widespread belief that the assassination occurred in the Senate House on the Roman Forum is historically inaccurate. To understand this, we need to consider the historical context of the period. The old Senate House, known as the Curia Hostilia, was burned down during urban riots in 52 BCE, when a mob of Clodius's supporters used it as a funeral pyre for their slain leader. At the time of Caesar's assassination in 44 BCE, a new Senate building, later called the Curia Julia, was under construction, initiated by Caesar himself, but completed only after his death under Augustus. The building visible today on the Roman Forum, known as the Curia, was constructed much later in 303 CE, during the reign of Emperor Diocletian, and represents a reconstruction of the earlier structure. Thus, modern tourists visiting Rome do not see the place where Caesar was killed, or even where the Senate met in his time. So, where did the assassination actually take place? Lacking a permanent venue, senators at the time often held meetings in temples or other public buildings. On March 15, 44 BCE, the famous Ides of March, the Senate was scheduled to meet in one of the halls adjacent to Pompey's Theater, the first permanent stone theater in Rome, built by Caesar's great rival, Gnaeus Pompey the Great. According to ancient sources, the specific site of the murder was an exedra, a large hall with a semicircular recess at one end, in the eastern part of the portico attached to the theater. This portico, known as the Portico of Pompey, was an expansive colonnade with gardens where Romans could stroll before or after theatrical performances. In the exedra stood a massive statue of Pompey himself, at whose base, according to Plutarch and Suetonius, the mortally wounded Caesar fell. The choice of this location for the Senate meeting may not have been coincidental. Some historians suggest the conspirators deliberately selected a site tied to the memory of Pompey, Caesar's great rival, whom he had defeated in the Civil War. The symbolism of the dictator falling at the feet of his vanquished opponent's statue would have been clear to any Roman of the time. Today, the exact location of Pompey's Theater and its adjacent portico is known to archaeologists. These structures were located in what is now the Campo dei Fiori district in Rome. The theater itself has not survived, though its outlines can be traced in the shape of modern buildings constructed on its foundations. The presumed site of the exedra, where the assassination likely occurred, is now hidden beneath modern structures and partially accessible through archaeological excavations at Largo di Torre Argentina. Interestingly, this area also houses the famous cat sanctuary, where dozens of cats live among the ruins of ancient temples, attracting tourists and animal lovers alike. Few of them realize they are walking mere steps from the site of one of the most famous political assassinations in human history. Final words, myths, and facts of Caesar's last moments. The dramatic moment of Caesar's assassination could not help but become shrouded in legends, and one of the most famous is his supposed last words, addressed to Marcus Junius Brutus, one of the chief conspirators. "And you, Brutus, or in Latin, et tu, Brute." This phrase has become iconic, entering most languages as a symbol of betrayal by a close ally. However, its historical authenticity is highly questionable. The source of this famous line is not a historical document, but a work of fiction, William Shakespeare's tragedy, Julius Caesar. Written around 1599, over 600 years after the events, Shakespeare, primarily a playwright rather than a historian, frequently adapted historical facts for dramatic effect, and et tu, Brute is a vivid example of such artistic invention. What do the ancient sources say about Caesar's final words? The primary historical accounts of the assassination come from Suetonius, Plutarch, and Appian, written in the 1st and 2nd centuries CE. Suetonius, in his biography of Caesar, states that upon seeing Brutus among the attackers, the dictator said in Greek, "And you, my child, keseteknon," before covering his head with his toga and ceasing resistance. Plutarch also reports that Caesar, seeing Brutus with a drawn dagger, covered his head and gave up fighting, but mentions no specific last words. Appian, meanwhile, records no spoken words at all. Why would Caesar speak in Greek rather than Latin? Greek was widely used among the Roman elite as the language of culture and education. Caesar, as a member of the highest aristocracy, received a classical education that included deep knowledge of Greek. Moreover, many philosophical works, including those on Stoicism, which taught self-mastery in the face of adversity, were written in Greek. It's possible that in his final moment, Caesar demonstrated Stoic dignity by addressing his killer in the language of philosophers. There is also a theory that the phrase, "And you, my child," reflects not only personal disappointment in Brutus, but also hints at a closer relationship. According to one historical hypothesis, Brutus may have been Caesar's illegitimate son by his lover Servilia, Brutus's mother. While there is no direct evidence for this, Caesar's relationship with Servilia is well documented, and the timeline makes such paternity plausible. If this theory holds, the last words carry a profoundly tragic meaning, not just betrayal by a friend and ally, but near parricide. However, even the Greek phrase is known to us only through Suetonius, who wrote over a century after the events. The reliability of this account remains an open question. In the chaos of the assassination, with over 60 conspirators surrounding their victim, it's unlikely anyone was focused on accurately recording spoken words. The last words of Caesar are likely more a literary trope, reflecting Roman ideals of a dignified death for a great man, than a historical reality. Another common misconception tied to the assassination is the idea that Caesar was killed with styluses, sharpened sticks used for writing on wax tablets. This myth, found in some fictional works, has no historical basis. According to all ancient sources, the conspirators used standard weapons, swords and daggers. Suetonius even provides a specific detail. Caesar received 23 wounds, of which, according to the physician Antistius, only one, the second in the chest, was fatal. The events following the assassination also became shrouded in myths. It's often believed that Caesar's body was left lying at the site of his death, until loyal slaves retrieved it under cover of night. In reality, according to Suetonius, 3 slaves who were present at the murder soon carried the body to his home on a litter, with one arm dangling because there was no fourth bearer. Subsequently, the body was cremated on the forum, and the site of the cremation became a spontaneous center of a popular cult venerating the deified Caesar. Thus, the famous phrase, "Et tu, Brute," is absent from historical sources and is a literary invention by Shakespeare, though loosely inspired by Suetonius's mention of last words in Greek. This example illustrates how artistic works can shape our perceptions of historical events, sometimes overshadowing the actual facts. Thanks for joining us to unravel the myths and truths of Julius Caesar. Subscribe now and like this video to explore more secrets of Rome's legendary figures and their enduring legacy.